There's a real sense now, I think, that partnerships are equally being focused on. And I find that a really important shift because of the numbers of children that can be impacted by partnerships with state schools. Partnerships between independent schools and state schools can be much, much greater than the number of children who can be positively impacted by bursaries, so free places at independent fee-paying schools. So I think that we need to be looking at both of these as equal but different types of ways that we can impact on social mobility in a really positive way from within the independent schools sector. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello. Now, in this week's episode, we're going to be putting bursaries and partnerships in the spotlight. And this is a particularly relevant topic right now because on the 8th of March in London, there was the conference that happens every 2 years focusing on bursaries and partnerships run by HMC, AGBIS and IDPE. And as I was sitting in that conference, and first of all, it was wonderful to just be in a normal conference, an actual in-person conference for the first time in a couple of years, for me at least. As I was sitting in that conference, there were a number of things that I noticed people were saying over and over again, kind of themes that were emerging from the conversations that we were having at the conference. So this week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through a couple of the themes that I've been seeing emerge. And first of all, the first thing I have to say is it was very, very welcome to have the conference focusing on partnerships as well as bursaries. This has been a long-running conference, but it's always been focused around bursaries with a little bit of partnerships thrown in. This time it was named the Bursaries and Partnerships Conference, and it was a very welcome change. And there's a real sense now, I think, that partnerships are equally being focused on. And I find that a really important shift because of the numbers of children that can be impacted by partnerships with state schools. Partnerships between independent schools and state schools can be much, much greater than the number of children who can be positively impacted by bursaries, so free places at independent fee-paying schools. So I think that we need to be looking at both of these as equal but different types of ways that we can impact on social mobility in a really positive way from within the independent schools sector. Before we dive into the detail, I wanted to let you know about a free resource I've created to help you prepare your school for the coming economic impact of the invasion of Ukraine. It's a checklist of things you need to think about and take action on now, and it's designed to prompt strategic conversations around the issues that actually matter. You can download your free copy at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/checklist. Okay, now let's continue with this week's episode. Okay, so let's dive in. I've got 4 trends that I've noticed as we were talking in the main plenary sessions, in the breakout sessions, and in conversations I was having during the breaks. The first of these, and I am delighted that this came up so strongly, is the importance of aligning your bursaries and partnerships programme with your school strategy. Now, you've heard me saying this for a very long time now, and if you're new to this podcast, you can go back through the previous episodes and see episodes on bursary strategy and how it can be linked in to your school strategy, and I'll put a link to those in the episode notes for you to listen to. But it is absolutely wonderful that I'm hearing so many other people now saying it. And the conversation kicked off exactly with this point. So John Maul, who is the warden of Radley College, and Philip Britton, the head of Bolton School, both saying that you have to know what you want your school to be, whether that's rooted in your history or whether that's taking your school in a different direction from historically. You need to know, what do you want your school to look like? What impact do you want to have on the pupils? Obviously, that's the first question you ask, but also on the world. And then working out how your bursaries and partnerships program, and you might do a bit more of one or a bit more of the other. It's possible you may just do bursaries or just do partnerships. That's all fine. Thinking about how those types of programs serve your ambition to be the school that you want to be, so that you can put bursaries and partnerships at the absolute centre of your vision for your school. And the really important reason why this matters is because it's not easy to do these things. It takes time from senior leadership, from governors. It takes money, which can often be raised through fundraising, but still it's resources that you're putting into quite a tough area that you're looking at, especially if you're doing it from the beginning, from scratch. And so you're only going to really keep going with it through the good times and the bad. And as we know, in the world out there at the moment, these are not great economic times. You're only going to stick with it if it's at the central part of your strategy. Now, a big question in my mind was, and there were a few schools that just privately were mentioning this to me around the conference rooms, what happens if you talk about your school's vision and this is not part of your vision? And to some extent, okay, maybe there are some schools for whom they're not ready yet to be embracing bursaries and partnerships. But I think there's a sector as a whole, the vast majority of schools, with the right conversations happening in the right way within those governor meetings, those senior leadership meetings. Maybe it's in the strategy away days, maybe it's in regular meetings, whatever works for your school. With the right conversations and the right kind of angles on these issues, I think that you will find that the vast majority of schools, this is an important part of your central vision. You just may not know it yet, or your governors or senior leadership team may not know it yet. So if you're in a school where you're struggling to get this sorted, where it isn't a central part of your strategy, keep plugging away at it, keep going at it. Talk to me if you need to. I can help you to maybe frame the right questions that you should be asking in those meetings, those settings. Because I think the more schools that can do this, the better. And we gain momentum across the sector as we do. So that's number one, aligning bursaries and partnerships with your strategy. Now, of course, that leaves you with a rather large list of things to be doing, but we will skip over that immediately and we will talk about the next theme that emerged from the conference. So the second thing that I heard really scattered throughout conversations was the synergies between partnerships and bursaries. Now, as I said before, it may be that your school decided to do one or the other, and that's fine if strategically that makes sense for you. But the majority of schools that I've been speaking to and that were talking at the conference were talking about actually these two different programs, the partnerships that you have with state schools and the free places, which is your bursary scheme, have so many synergies between them that it's really important that you think about them together. So you make sure that you're harnessing how those feed into each other. And this, I think, is especially true for day schools or schools who have a significant number of day pupils and they're looking for bursaries in the day pupil kind of part of their school. Because the opportunities here to work with your state, local primary schools are really, really obvious. And I think Philip Britton really summed it up beautifully. He said in the very opening session, we expect bursary applicants to just flock to us because we have bursaries. And so obviously they will be queuing up at your gates to get in. That is not true. They won't, because there are huge barriers for these children and their families to even know about the opportunities that are available for bursaries in independent schools, and then to walk through those rather intimidating gates sometimes into a world that they are not familiar with. And I would hope that schools would always make them feel welcome when they do, but they're not necessarily knowing that in advance. There's a whole raft of bursary marketing that needs to happen to ensure that even once you've got the funding in place for bursaries, you are finding the young children, the children in your communities who are going to really benefit from those bursaries. You cannot assume that they will automatically flock to you. And therefore, the partnerships that you forge with local primary schools is really important, because if you can break down some of those barriers and help those pupils, those state school pupils and their families, and the parents are absolutely key at this point in the decision-making process, to understand that actually you're just like them. You're people, you're open, you're welcoming, you want them to get involved in your school and then know about and then apply for the bursaries that are available. It is slightly different for boarding schools. I did have a few conversations with people who were saying that actually it's a slightly different model. It's not always as straightforward to link your partnerships to your bursary programme if you're a boarding school, but it's definitely possible. And there were schools doing it. It's definitely possible. So really, there isn't any excuse, I don't think, for not finding the right recipients for these bursaries once they're available. I have actually worked with schools relatively recently where they've said that they've really struggled to find applicants for their bursaries that they do have. They might have, funding for one or two. They're finding it really hard to find applicants for those, and therefore they're facing questions about, why should we raise more money through a fundraising route and a focus on this if we can't even give away the ones we've got? And of course, those of us who have been kind of around the block a few times, we know that actually there's a whole bursary marketing piece that needs to happen so that people do know about them. You have no excuse for not going out there into your communities and finding them, and partnerships are a great way to make that happen. So that's point number 2, the theme that's emerging from the conference, the synergies between partnerships and bursaries. The third theme that I saw emerging from the conference was the ripple effect. So Ali Henderson, CEO of the Royal National Children's Springboard Foundation, and if you don't know them, they're an amazing organisation that places disadvantaged young people on bursaries into independent schools, traditionally boarding schools, but now also day schools as well. And what Ali was talking about was that the ripple effect, both on the school community and on those pupils' home communities, is really significant, and that they've been doing some really important work to try and measure that impact. And in actual fact, she mentioned that their impact report, the next impact report that will come out in the autumn, so that'll be autumn 2022, is going to be showing how they've started to measure that. So I'm definitely going to be watching out for that when it comes out. And it's a ripple effect from partnerships as well as bursaries. So we always think about bursaries as having an impact on the individual child who receives the bursary, a positive impact on the school community and on their home communities, but the same is also true for partnerships. And it was interesting to hear Adam Pettit, head of Highgate School, talking about the huge benefits of, in a really organic way, not a kind of forced, uncomfortable way, but an organic way, bringing young people together from across state schools and independent schools to help them to talk about and take action on issues that both of those groups care about, issues that young people across the world care about, things like sustainability, social justice. So helping schools to understand that we don't need to create kind of cringe-worthy social mixers for these two separate groups of pupils from state and independent schools. We need to create opportunities and events that these young people are really interested in, that they will just naturally mingle, talk, chat, take action on these issues that they really care about. And it brings huge benefits to the independent school pupils, the fee-paying independent school pupils, but without making it feel like it's a kind of a forced, we're going to go out into the community and do some good type patronising point of view. It's just a natural part of your experience when you're in that school. So I think that we're going to see more and more people talking about this ripple effect. And I think if we can start to measure it, that's fantastic. But even if it's just anecdotal to begin with, especially when it comes to fundraising for bursaries and for partnerships from current parents, yes, we would hope that they would make donations because it's the right thing to do, and a lot of them will. But a lot of them also just want to know that this is also the right thing for their child, that the school's strategy and vision is taking their child's school in a direction that's actually going to benefit their children as well. So being able to articulate the positive ripple effect within the school community, I think, is really important. And the more that we're seeing people do that and experiment with measuring these things, incorporating also increasing amounts of research that's out there into cognitive diversity and the benefits of cognitive diversity within classrooms that's influencing bursary programmes perhaps in particular. I think this is really important, and we're going to see more and more of this, and the more schools that can be focusing on how to communicate this positive ripple effect, the better. And then finally, I have one fourth theme that I saw emerging, and I have to admit this one perhaps was slightly less prevalent across all the sessions, but it really struck me in the couple of sessions where it was mentioned. And that is, although the conference as a whole had a really upbeat tone, largely because it was the first time that all of us were coming back together again in a conference of that size, and so there was kind of an excitement in the room, but also because there was a sense of this is a really important topic, and we're seeing some amazing examples from the stage of schools that are doing fantastic work. So there was generally an upbeat kind of tone to the sessions. But there were a few really sobering facts in there, and Ali Henderson of Springboard put those front and centre within the first session of the day and was talking about how, as a sector, an independent school sector, we haven't really grown the number of 100% bursaries over recent years. I mean, yes, you can look at the figures in a kind of different way. You can the ISC census figures, and yes, there has been a switch away from scholarships, which are not means tested, towards means tested bursaries. And there's some good stuff in there that's happening, but if you actually look at the number of 100% bursaries being given, there isn't actually a lot of movement. And that's a bit concerning because we've been working on this for years now. So that's a really sobering fact. And the other thing that she mentioned is that we also haven't really massively shifted who we're targeting with these bursaries so that they can be truly transformational. There's still a sense that a lot of the bursary holders actually are coming from families where their parents can contribute something towards school fees, but not the full amount. So they're getting a 50% bursary or 60% bursary or something around that. And yet actually what we really need to be doing is also, as well as those pupils, which that is important, there's an important rationale for that within a school community, to have a whole mix of people from across society, but that actually we need to do better on targeting these 100% bursaries on the pupils that genuinely would have no access to this excellent education if they weren't able to have 100%. And in many cases, we call them 110% bursaries, because it not only covers the 100% of the school fees, but it's also giving them money for the uniform, for the school trips, the music lessons, things that other pupils at the school would also be participating in. And given that those numbers haven't really changed massively, there is a lot more work for us to do in the sector. And this is being noticed by others outside the sector, that these figures are not shifting. The number of 100% bursaries is not increasing, including being noticed by government. So we have to do better. We have to be able to take action in as many schools as we can. And I think that James Turner, Chief Executive of the Sutton Trust, summed it up really nicely. And he said, just because you can't do everything to improve social mobility, and he was recognising the fact that these programmes, on the grand scale of things, they have a relatively small impact on the whole issue of social mobility across our society. But just because you can't do everything to improve social mobility doesn't mean that you don't do anything. You still take action, you still do what you can, and you push forwards as a sector. And I'm reminded actually of the conversation that I had with David Goodhue on the podcast a couple of months ago now. And I'll link to that episode in the episode notes here. And he was saying that all schools have to start somewhere. They didn't start, 15, 20 years ago, as some schools did. At Latimer Upper, where he's the head, they've actually made a really significant difference just within sort of 10 or so years of fundraising for bursaries. In fact, I think it's less than that. I think it's more like 8 years of fundraising for bursaries, made a really significant progress. So even if you haven't started yet, we all have to start somewhere. It may be small to begin with, but it may as well be now. There is no better time to start on your journey towards having a bursaries and partnerships programme than now. So I think we all have to start this journey somewhere. Don't give up, keep learning, keep sharing, and together as a sector we will make an impact. And I think conferences like the one that we had on the 8th of March are really important for hearing those sobering facts, but also seeing some amazing best practice from across the sector. So massive thanks to everybody who spoke at that conference, to HMC, AGBIS and IDPE for putting it on. It is such an important part of my calendar. Every 2 years, I really look forward to getting together and talking about these really important programmes within independent schools. I love hearing your feedback. So let me know if you were at the conference, did you notice these 4 themes? Or were you noticing something different? And if you weren't lucky enough to be at the conference this time, I hope that this summary has given you a little bit of a taste of where the sector is heading and what we're seeing emerge as themes from the sector. So that is it from me for this time. I will look forward to talking to you next time, and have a great strategic week. Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.